Good morning, students. Today we are going to discuss second unit of 12th biology, that is genetics. The term genetics was given by Bateson. Okay. Genetics term involves two aspects. It has two aspects: inheritance or heredity and variation. There are two different aspects, opposite aspects of biology. Variation is equally important in genetics like to that of inheritance. In inheritance, the properties flow 100% similar from one to another generation. But variation, which is very negligible from generation to generation, but very much significant after generations or million of years. It enables us to adapt the change in climate. In different climatic conditions, we can adapt ourselves. So, there are two aspects of genetics: inheritance and variation. You know, asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. In asexual reproduction, only one parent is involved generally. Okay, but in sexual condition, there are two parents, male and female, both contribute their gamete for the appearance of a new generation. What is difference between a ramete? Rametes are the products of sexual reproduction. Means these rametes have significant level of variation among themselves as well as against their parents. Okay. The rametes can be compared with that of clones. What are clones? These are genetically similar and produced mainly by asexual reproduction. Sometimes twins are present. Where twins get more similarity, either with ramete or with clones? It is similar with rametes. It has greater variation than clones because twins are produced by fusion of gametes through sexual reproduction. So, against the asexual reproduction, sexual reproduction contain more variation, but asexual reproduction has very much inheritance or heredity, means constancy of characters from one to another generation. So, in genetics, we will study the mechanism of heredity and variation, how they run, how they operate, how they bring changes. Okay. So, to before explain the inheritance and variation, we are going to explain the reason of variation. What is the reason behind variation? The variation can be of two types. One is continuous and another is discontinuous variation. Continuous variation, as the name suggests, it is continue from one to another generation. Means it has a very slow speed and continuity at the same event. It repeats. So it is slow and continuous appearance of changes, genetic changes, that is continuous variation. Continuous variation appears in every type of cell division, whether mitosis or meiosis, because meiosis is limited to sexual reproduction and variation is common in both asexual and sexual, but in sexual reproduction it is very much diversified, but in asexual reproduction it is very limited. So continuous variation appears in both asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. Where it appears, we will study it in the next molecular genetics level. First of all, see the continuous changes in genetic matter comes through error in mitosis. Okay, error in mitosis. But discontinuous variation, its content, its degree, its time, its event, its step is uncertain. It is saltatory. It may occur randomly and it is also hereditary in nature. It is due to polyploidy. It may be due to crossing over. It may be due to fertilization. Okay, there are chances of appearance of abruptive type of genetic changes while polyploidy, crossing over and fertilization. All these changes are discontinuous. So there are two types of variations. One is common in asexual and sexual reproduction and another is limited to sexual reproduction only. Now we see the types of genetics. There are three main branches of genetics. These are first classical genetics. Next one is molecular genetics, and then is population genetics. Since events are very large in genetics and similar kind of events are categorized into these three, these are classical genetics, molecular and population genetics. Classical genetics is also called as Mendelian genetics because very classical ideas of genetics that evolved first time without any molecular proof. It was based upon very crude phenotypic character. Phenotypic characters means that appears externally, but external appearance sometimes causes delusion and it is corrected by molecular genetics. So classical genetics explains only superficial results in the ratio proportion of characters from one to another generation. It not explains the basic ideas of metabolism involved in that variation, that inheritance. So the father of classical genetics is Mendel, and hence it is called Mendelian genetics. Now if one want to see the metabolic explanation of the genetics, we will move to molecular genetics. Here we will explain chemical regions, means metabolism of genetics, and it is revealed in three steps, that is replication, transcription and translation. These three events explains all the events of genetics on the basis of metabolic steps. Okay. Now third one is population genetics. These two are limited to individuals. Okay. But the concept of genetics is not limited to the cell, not to the individuals. Its effect is seen in the society, in the community, where a particular type of character is whether increasing, decreasing, deleting, every type. So all these type of answers we get from the population genetics. Means it must have a strong idea of statistics. All the data of statistics are involved in population genetics to conclude whether an allele is favored by the atmosphere or some alleles are disfavored, which type of characters are more and more increasing, which is resistant to this type of stresses. All these conclusions we draw from population genetics. Here, population genetics, we study the basic rule of Hardy and Weinberg, which explains the region of organic evolution, and it also find out the numerical values of every type, each and every type of variation also. So these are three main types of population. Other than these branches, there are also different bases of classification of genetics, but let us first start the classical genetics or Mendelian genetics. Okay. Out of these three branches, we are going to reveal the first of all, Mendelian genetics. Mendelian genetics, why? Because Gregor John Mendel 1823 to 1884 first of all started this study. So it is called Mendelian genetics. Okay. Before Mendel, what was the idea of genetics? And that is called blending inheritance. Idea of genetics before Mendel. These are non-scientific ideas of philosophy. Many philosophers, including Aristotle, Theophrastus, Pliny, at different times explained the mechanism of inheritance in their own views. Most of them concluded that every organism produces similar type of offsprings, means their body must produce some invisible type of vapors or fluid or some tiny particles, some dust particles, spores, or any other minute form. These assemble in the reproductive organs and produces the new organism. Some of these were ovists and some of them were spermatists. Ovists assume that ovum contain the humanculus, means minute form of human, and a sperm when comes in contact with ovum, it become activated into individuals. But spermatists had opposite idea that a sperm contain the reduced form of human, that is humanculus, and it is induced by the contact type of human. Many scientists, they were since basically philosophers, they have no tools and techniques to study the inheritance pattern. So all of them produced a different kind of non-scientific idea, but their importance was that Both the parents, male and female, are required for sexual reproduction, and some type of unit are contributed by each of parent. It was strengthened by all these blending inheritance givers. But these are non-scientific, but these provide a strong base for scientific researches in genetics that was started by Mendel. Okay, let us see the Mendel's effort in the next discussion.